and welcome to our multimedia presentation for EDC1200, Studies of Self, Education and Society.
The purpose of this presentation is to analyse a national event and to discuss the issues involved, such as multiculturalism and gender. In this presentation, we'll be investigating the Australian Open and the social issues that come to play at this event.
By using the Australian Open as a prompt, we'll further explore how educators might go about at exposing children to these issues of difference, dominance and diversity.
We will also discuss how we, as future educators, can provide children with the strategies necessary to cope with these issues.
The Australian Open is an annual tennis tournament held just outside the heart of Melbourne. It is a highly anticipated sporting event involving both men and women, where multiple games are played consisting of both doubles and single matches over the course of January. Players compete for the title of champion and the prize money that comes with it.
The event is heavily broadcast through Australia and watched by millions. As suggested by Rossi, media has a strong and influential impact on the popularity of sport, tennis in particular, persuading many Australians to follow and support this event.
Adair and Van Plu highlighted that with the advent of new technology and greater consumer demands, televised sporting events have proved to be a meaningful way of judging the game. The eagle eye, a slow-motion replay focusing on the ball, is useful in accurately determining the result of a game. This is a primary example of an effective use of technology at the Australian Open.
I agree with you that technology is both enhancing our understanding of sport and reinforcing the rules of the game. Despite these positive advancements, however, there have been many controversial issues associated with this event.
One of the leading issues in this tournament is gender. The Australian Open provides classic examples of gender stereotyping and inequality. Gender exploitation is also apparent.
Gender stereotyping champions men in sport and encourages male participation, whereas when the women play, punters are more focused on fashion and social aspects, such as relationship status. Gender inequality is evident through unequal airtime on television and the fact that spectators need to pay more to see a male tennis match. In the past, gender inequality regarding prize money has been heavily debated. According to reporter Scott Gullen, prize money wasn't divided equally between male and female contenders until the year 2000.
Gender exploitation, otherwise known as sexploitation, is a common occurrence at sporting events, including the Australian Open. The transition in women's tennis from conservative to more revealing uniforms is a primary example of the exploitation of women and reinforces previous statements of gender stereotyping. It is perhaps also a method of increasing viewing numbers. Clearly then, women are at a disadvantage in the Australian Open, as with many other sporting events, compared to men. Sadly, because of these gender inequalities, the event could have an impact on young children's self-esteem and confidence, especially young girls.
Multiculturalism is another relevant issue at the Australian Open. Players travel from across the globe to participate in this event, aspiring to win the well-renowned title of either men's or women's champion.
Players from different countries bring with them their own national identity. However, the Australian Open tends to highlight our identity. Because of Australia's ethnic diversity, we need to create a vibrant and ever-changing national identity, whether that is advertised as multicultural or not.
However, the multicultural element of the Australian Open may have a negative impact on families, particularly those of different cultural upbringings and beliefs, since many wish to maintain both their individual and cultural identities.
Globalization, for instance, has posed several issues for those who have tried to resist other cultural values and beliefs.
Australia is also largely identified through its rich involvement in sport. According to Rossi, there is a myth that all Australians consider sport as an important aspect of their lives. However, this is one of the many stereotypes that represent our national identity. It is a stereotypical view, as some Australians do not see the significance of sport and, therefore, do not back national sporting competitions such as the Australian Open.
Australian children are exposed from an early age to this country's rich sporting culture. Children are encouraged to participate in sporting events as the majority sees it as a fundamental part of being Australian. Therefore, we must deem sport as an important but not an essential part of our identity. According to Rossi, however, sport remains a major icon of the Australian identity.
In the following section of this presentation, we will explore how this event can be used to educate students on the relevant issues of multiculturalism and gender. Ideas will be put forward on how educators can use these issues to form positive understandings of difference, dominance, and diversity.
Welcome to part 2 of our presentation. As discussed previously, discourses of gender and multiculturalism are identifiable in the Australian Open. Our challenge today, however, is to explicitly teach students about these issues of difference, dominance, and diversity.
Since the Australian Open is an international tournament, it has a significant impact on our society. This is largely thanks to the amount of attention the event receives through both the media and its supporters.
Stereotypes, then, go largely unchallenged due to well-established ideas and attitudes associated with the event. These stereotypes tend to manipulate children's perspective of whom and what they should be, as either males or females. Cultural stereotypes are also evident in the Australian Open, with the majority of viewers having already preconceived ideas of the different nationalities competing in the tournament.
In this section, we will focus on both gender and multiculturalism. Now, let's take a look at a lesson targeted at Year 4 students. Now, in our last lesson, we talked about the Australian Open. Can anyone recall the two main issues we discussed? That's right, Billy, we discussed gender and multiculturalism. Now, what do you think the world would be like if we were all the same? What if we were all male or all female? What if we were all of the one nationality? Would our lives be any different to what they are now?
At this age, children are discovering who they are and establishing their own perceptions of the world. It is therefore crucial for educators to create an environment in which children are actively constructing their own identities. The teacher, in this situation, for instance, is inviting children to think about difference.
Now, yesterday we formed groups and researched the different nationalities of contestants. We then talked about the different cultures and what they involve. Now, can anyone remember some of the significant identifiers of these cultures?
Teaching children to embrace difference and diversity is essential in today's society. This is of particular importance in a country like Australia that has been founded on the values, attitudes and beliefs of various cultures.
Great ideas, everyone. So now we know that difference is partly brought about by culture. Now, at the Australian Open, even though the competitors and spectators are all different, they are brought together by the common interest of tennis, giving everyone involved a sense of belonging. Now, this sense of belonging, which all humans crave, is a crucial link to a cross-cultural and more globalised identity.
The objective for this lesson on multiculturalism is to develop an awareness of the differences and similarities between cultures. Here, the teacher provides an ideal opportunity for children to expand on their knowledge of culture from a positive perspective, which, according to Pamela and Isis Tidet, discourages the development of stereotypical and prejudiced views in the classroom. Ellen further proposed that by exploring and identifying stereotypes, this further allows children to break free of cultural barriers. Although there is little doubt that cultural stereotypes exist, in the Australian Open, such stereotypes are predominantly linked to gender.
As discussed in section 1 of this presentation, gender stereotypes are still a relevant issue in today's society. Teachers need to allow their students to actively participate in what are considered traditional male and female gender roles. Now, teachers should be constantly defying gender stereotypes and aiding children in discovering who they are. This eases the pressure of today's society and its inequitable ideas of gender.
Yesterday, we looked at multiculturalism in the Australian Open. However, this morning we will be talking about gender. Can anyone recall the names of the male contestants? What characteristics stood out the most to you? Exactly! Most of the men were seen as competitive, aggressive, strong. What about the female players? They were very fashionable, weren't they? Then again, I do recall some of you saying that they were much weaker and less physically capable in their performance than the men. Why do we have these ideas about males and females? Why can't the men be fashionable? And who says women can't be strong?
Irrespective of a woman's capacity or ability to perform in different sports, women are still perceived by society as less confident, both physically and mentally. The teacher in this situation is trying to challenge society's ideas on gender and is encouraging children to think divergently.
Looking at these characteristics of men and women, does anyone agree with such representations of gender? Perhaps there are qualities that each of you possess that are different. Qualities that you might consider as more masculine or feminine. Individually, I would like you to construct a list of what makes you either male or female. When you're finished, find a partner and compare your thoughts. Whilst you're working, I'm going to do my own list on the board.
In this activity, the teacher is trying to establish awareness in her students in regards to gender. She acknowledges that students' ideas and opinions will differ based on their home context and the influences on students, which have contributed to the shaping of their identity.
Excellent work, guys! You have thoroughly identified the various features that form gender. We've also touched on the notion of male domination in sport and recognised this issue within our chosen event. Do you think males and females should be treated equally? Why?
The Australian Open focuses on men, resulting in the marginalisation of women. Gamov and Poole consider our society as one of the many that upholds a patriarchal dividend where there is both an economical and social dominance of men over women. The teacher has made the children aware of this fact. This is evident through many aspects of the event such as prize money, ticket prices, media coverage, attire and physical attributes of the players. Teachers also need to treat their students equitably and adopt an open-minded perspective on gender.
To summarise what we have learnt this week, I have printed some tennis balls for everyone to personalise. I would like you to decorate them and write a word on each describing who you are, and then when you are finished you can choose part of the net I have drawn on the board and attach your tennis balls. I've done some examples to help you get started. Teacher. Kind and friendly.
In this activity, the teacher is trying to tie everything that the class has recently learned about multiculturalism and gender into an overall theme of difference, dominance and diversity. Obviously, once the class has finished this activity, the teacher would need to further discuss difference with them. Here, the teacher is continuing to expand the students' knowledge of these social issues whilst referring back to the main event, the Australian Open. It is important to note also that for teaching to be effective, educators need to select topics that have relevance to their students, making learning an enjoyable experience.
It is therefore crucial for children to challenge societal norms and perceptions of what it means to be different, whilst also being tolerant and accepting of others.
The aim for educators in teaching students about important social issues such as gender and multiculturalism is to reduce discrimination. Students are the future and must be made aware of such issues in order to shape their own identities as well as their understandings of the world in which they live.
That concludes our multimedia presentation for EDC 1200, Studies of Self-Education and Society.
Sweet songs come